So in this video, we're going to talk about some mistakes that you might be making that make memorizing your speech much harder. Stand by, because if you eliminate some of these mistakes in your preparation and the way that you deliver your presentations, you'll make memorizing those presentations much easier. Hey, this is Doug Staneart with Fearless Presentations, the fastest, easiest way to eliminate public speaking fear. On this session, we're going to cover just a few of the mistakes that people will tend to make that make memorizing a speech a little bit harder. So if you've ever stayed up the night before a presentation trying to memorize a speech or afraid that you're going to forget something, there's a good chance that you might be experiencing one of these presentation mistakes that makes the memorization part of the presentation much harder. So the very first thing, the very first mistake anyway, that a lot of times people will make when they're designing their presentations is they start with the visual aid. They start with the slideshow. So basically what most people do is we sit down to design our presentation. We say, okay, what do I know about this topic? And then they start making slides on a PowerPoint slideshow or some other type of visual aid. Problem with that is that we haven't really determined what we're gonna say yet. So the visual aid should be a way to help us deliver the speech more effectively, not be the actual speech itself. So what tends to happen is people will end up with this huge presentation that has a massive amount of bullet points, and then if you're trying to remember one bullet point after the other, number one, that's going to be very boring and very difficult to deliver, and then number two, it's going to be very easy for you to forget something that you really wanted to say. So that's the very first mistake. If you eliminate that from your preparation, number one, you'll eliminate a lot of the nervousness from your delivery. You'll also increase your ability to memorize the content pretty dramatically. The second mistake, the second thing that people will do to try to memorize their presentation is they'll write the presentation out word for word and try to memorize the entire presentation. Now, you might be able to get away with that if you've got a 2-minute presentation or a 3-minute presentation. That is not very difficult to memorize for a lot of people. But if you've got a 15-minute presentation, a 30-minute presentation, an hour-long presentation, anything over 10 minutes, that's going to be very difficult to deliver. So just keep that in mind. One of the techniques that we teach people how to do in the Fearless Presentations class is, instead of writing a presentation word for word, create an outline of your presentation. Come up with your key concepts and then come up with different pieces of evidence to support those key concepts. It makes it much easier for you to design the process, design the presentation from scratch, and it makes it much easier to memorize your content, because you're not memorizing it word for word, you're just memorizing key concepts. Much easier. The third mistake that people will make is they do what we call data dumping or data dumping. It's giving too much content in too short of a period of time. The key thing to keep in mind about the way human beings remember things is that we typically only like to remember 2, 3, 4, 5 things at a time. Anything more than 5 concepts, and we're going to overwhelm the person who's in the audience. The same is true for presenters as well. If we're covering too much stuff, it's going to be much more difficult for us to remember it as well. So if it's difficult for us to remember the content, guess what? It's probably going to be hard for the audience to remember it as well. So instead of covering 10 things, 15 things, 20 things, 30 things in your presentation, try to condense your presentation down to maybe 3 key concepts, 4 key concepts, 5 key concepts. And in fact, if you do it that way, you can create your entire presentation in one slide. It makes it much easier for the audience to understand what you're trying to get across to them. And then when you get to the point where you're trying to memorize your presentation, it's going to be much easier for you to memorize the concepts as well. So once you eliminate those key mistakes from your preparation, it becomes much easier to memorize your presentation. And in fact, in the next video, I'm going to give you what I call a memory hack that will help you memorize any concepts that you want to get across in your presentation in minutes. So stay tuned for the very next video. Make sure and subscribe to the channel so you get all of the content when it's released, and leave a comment below with some of your experiences related to trying to memorize your presentations. We'll see you in the next video.